Did you hear that?
No.
This is madness.
No.
When 900 years old, you reach understood you or not. Nerf herder. I'm a Jedi.
It's a little short for a stormtrooper.
We are what they grow beyond.
Welcome back to the Droids You're Looking For Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Rachel. So glad you could listen to this very special episode. I'm joined today by some great friends of mine, and I hope they'll become some great friends of yours. Mike, Chris, Sam, welcome to the pod.
Ooh,
Thank you
Sam
so
was
much.
laughing while I did that. He
Thank
almost
you
made me
so
crack.
much. Thank you so much for having me.
I feel like there's a great elevation of the podcast with that. It felt like it was a lot more professional just from you doing that.
Yeah.
I was
That was
definitely channeling like NPR, public radio, easy listening.
Yeah,
professional
no.
voice.
I like that a lot.
Thank you.
Can we
I think
record that and have you do that every week?
Yeah. Yeah. Can you?
I'll pop into the office just to do the intro, and then I'll go and do my own thing.
Sadly,
it.
we do
It's
not
the
have
name.
Ryan, though. You did not get to introduce Ryan.
Well, Ryan's not here.
He's not
If he
here.
was here, he would be introduced.
Fair.
Sorry, who?
Oh.
No, Ryan's my buddy. I'm not throwing down that gauntlet. Hey, man, we miss you. We hope your travels are going good. Ryan's out traveling, you guys, and we miss him, and we love him, and we're excited to have him back next week.
Hi, Ryan.
What kind of gauntlet were you talking about? Were you talking about maybe an infinity gauntlet?
Oh.
Snap? Did you just say
Oh.
snap? And just like that, Ryan got dusted, and we'll never see him again.
Oh.
Oh, too bad.
So
Well-
do we talk about where we can follow? Who's doing that? Are you doing that?
Are you looking at me? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you can follow, rate, and review the pod. On Twitter, we're at DroidsPod. On Instagram, we are also DroidsPod. I'm going to say we because I feel like I'm a part of the group now.
You are a part of the group.
Now you have
Thank
to
you.
check
Thank
it.
you. Affirmations. Facebook, we're at the Droids Podcast. And Gmail, we're at droidspod@gmail.com. Now, I regularly email this account, so
Oh,
other
boy.
people should too. Just putting that out there.
And if you do, you'll get to read the intro and be a guest on the pod as well.
Is that how I got invited?
Yep.
Oh, that's so cool.
Let's not write checks we can't cash.
Oh, I like that. Especially if you're a super famous person. Not to say you're not super famous, Rachel, but
No, I definitely am.
If-
I definitely am.
yeah, you definitely
Everyone listening, it's that Rachel.
are. Yeah, it's that Rachel.
Who are the most famous Rachels? It's a good question.
Rachel McAdams.
Yeah,
The haircut.
probably.
Rachel Weisz.
The haircut
Vice.
from Friends.
But
the
that's
Rachel.
a fictional Rachel.
Oh, the
I'm
Rachel
thinking of
Green.
the real
No, I'm
Rachel.
not. No, I'm not saying the character. I'm saying the haircut. The Rachel.
Oh, yes.
It's
Oh, yeah.
probably the most famous real life Rachel.
There's, of course, everyone's
Really?
favorite Rachel from the Dark Knight trilogy.
Sure, that is true. That is true.
Is that Maggie Gyllenhaal?
It was at
for
one
half,
point.
For half of her appearances. Spoilers for The Dark Knight Rises? Question mark?
Maybe.
Well,
If
I
you
know
believe in reincarnation.
we don't have Ryan with us, but Chris, you have a little bit of a shout out you want to give to Ryan while he's no longer on this pod, or at least for
I
this
do.
episode?
Be
Longer.
specifically. I do specifically have a shout out for Ryan, and that's for Ryan Plays Knights of the Old Republic. You can follow Ryan on twitch.tv/RyanDroidsPod. That's twitch.tv/RyanDroidsPod. To follow him playing the classic Star Wars game, Knights of the Old Republic. He's going through piece by piece. I think he's doing some good work. It's an ambitious endeavor, but I think it'll be worth it. Especially, I like that he's gearing up beforehand here, before Benioff and Weiss get into their potential Old Republic thing. We're gonna have the definitive Star Wars take on Knights of the Old Republic before that movie comes out. So I'm pretty excited about that.
We're going to have one of the nation's foremost experts on Knights of the Old Republic
Exactly.
lore.
Exactly. So you might want to keep tuning in. So, and then so Ryan, keep doing that, and
think
so that's whoa.
I think that this week with his travel, I think Ryan mentioned he doesn't have a new episode to upload this week, which I think for everybody listening means it's a great week to catch up on his previous. I think he's three sessions in now, 3 or 4. So it's a great opportunity to get some of those episodes under your belt, really get in the KOTOR groove.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen it, it's new to you. So
yeah, and
right.
Sam, you mentioned everybody listening. Does that also mean yourself? Because I think I'm right there with you. I need to catch up. I have not had a chance to watch all of Ryan's glory in this KOTOR playthrough.
I didn't know this was a call-out podcast, Mike.
There you go, Ryan.
Have you spent enough time with me yet?
Very true. I should have seen it coming.
Now I know what we're doing this weekend.
Grab the family, get on the couch, throw it on the TV. It's lovely. Well, thank you, Ryan. We wish you the safest travels. We'll see you back in our galaxy soon.
Chris, is it family friendly? I can't. I don't know.
I can't
you get the whole
vouch for
family
that.
and throw it on the couch?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it just depends what you want to subject the family to.
That sounds like exactly how Ryan would approve of his playthrough being described.
Yeah. Subjecting it to. No, it's great. It's great. Again, that's twitch.tv/Ryan Droids Pod. Taking the name a little bit, but that's okay. Ryan Droids Pod.
Chris is a little salty. Yeah.
I just don't get it. No, it's Ryan is leading that front, and we thank you, and can't wait to get you back here, buddy.
Well, Rachel, you gave us this fantastic introduction, but really we need to get an introduction to you as a Star Wars fan. So we want to know a little bit more about your experience beyond just spending a lot of time with not only one of the hosts of the pod, but the rest of the pod as well. Tell us about your experience as a Star Wars fan, when you watched them for the first time, when you maybe got a little bit more in-depth conversation from a certain someone about the films and the franchise. Let us know about you as a Star Wars fan.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this morning. I don't remember which movie I saw first, and I don't remember where I was or how old I was when it happened. My first Star Wars memory is seeing Revenge of the Sith in theaters with my brothers, because my younger brother, Noah, I remember that he actively climbed up onto his seat during the it was the volcanic island duel.
Him and Ryan alike.
The
Mustafar, the duel on Mustafar. He climbed up onto the seat, so it was a very active memory for me. I'm sure I saw the previous 2 of the new trilogy.
The prequels.
The prequels. I'm so sorry. The prequels in theaters as well. I just don't have very vivid memories of them. And I don't know if I saw them in number order or if I had seen the original trilogy before I saw the prequels. I just don't remember, which kind of sadly means they probably didn't make that much of an impact the first time around.
Sam, we talked about vetting before. Why haven't you vetted people? I don't understand.
No. So I will say, I went to see all the Star Wars movies. I know that I saw the prequels when they were in theaters. I think for me, seeing Star Wars was akin to seeing the Harry Potter movies, where it was you go to see these things. You actively engage with these franchises as a consumer. But I think I was a very casual fan until I was indoctrinated into the House of Star Wars that was 8 and 8, where Chris and Sam lived. And
The Old
Chris
Republic.
made us watch the movies on a regular basis. I believe
is the correct word.
It was once a month there was a Star Wars night leading up to Force Awakens?
This is correct, yeah.
Yes. So that was when I did my first rewatch. And potentially my only rewatch since. Have we watched any?
Guess what? Maybe they'll come back.
I don't know.
I was going to ask.
Have rewatched. They have been on in the household. So.
Maybe
I've probably been sleeping.
Maybe Star Wars nights will come back. I don't know. It's April. How many months until episode 9? 8.
Return of the
Jedi movie screenings, my friend. Return of the screenings. Return of the That's the Beatles. Return of the screenings.
More civilized era.
Both civilized age.
We just sound like we're from Liverpool.
This is what I live with.
Chris, please don't joke about this. I actually would really like you to start that. Let's start that and we'll
No,
make
it's
them
not a joke.
podcast
It's
nights.
not. It's not a joke. It's
Good.
it's a real thing. Let's fire it up.
All right.
That's no moon.
Oh dear.
Are we talking hour-long introductions to each film? How's this going to work?
That's what I did previously.
Hour.
I could probably reuse some of the old introductions. Actually, those might be kind of fun to post online. I know we have a few videos and stuff, so check out our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/droidspod, and we'll throw some of the intros and stuff that we did in the past up there.
Are you sure it's not YouTube/Ryan Droids Pod?
I see. I don't know now. I don't know. Let's not confuse our listeners.
Hey, well, listeners, we'll hit you back with that YouTube channel soon.
We'll put a link in the description.
You know, I'll tell you what. You got a few creative people who have some video, have some writing experience. I think we could start up with some hot and fresh to coin a phrase that I've just invented myself for the first time. Some hot and fresh content.
Right. Yeah.
So, Rachel, you were indoctrinated at Chris and Sam's place with all of these screenings and rewatches of the film. From there, did the passion build for Star Wars? How did things develop from that point?
Yeah, I would say I definitely enjoyed that experience. I think they are really fun movies to watch in a group. I'm not really a person who like sits down to watch a movie by myself or actively chooses to watch one on a regular basis, which is been a topic of contention in our house because Sam is a big movie person. But I definitely think they've been really fun to watch in groups and really fun to talk about. I think my favorite one at this point is either like the original or Force Awakens. Because there was so much buildup for Force Awakens that just like the adrenaline alone made it such an exciting movie to watch. And I think the original is actually very funny in comparison to the prequels and some of the heavier moments that have happened in the newer movies. It's actually kind of light and funny. And so that's, yeah, I would say those are like my two faves. If I were to put on a movie now, if I were to scare Sam and say like, oh my God, we have to watch a movie tonight, it would
scare or thrill. No, I would just jump in. And I mean, the thing I see in those two choices, I think it's cool. Like those two are, I think, two of the best paced and most propulsive in the series.
Agreed.
Neither of those is like one of the slow down Star Wars movies. You know, they're both pretty aggressive adventure, and they both tend to be upbeat, you know.
There's a slow down Star Wars movie? I don't know what cinematic universe you're watching.
I think the middle beats of the first trilogy and this one, The Last Jedi. I mean, I think those are more, it's you know, as Ryan would say, the full meal episodes of the series, you know, and those full meal ones, I think I don't mean they slow down in the sense of like, I'm not talking about boring, or I'm not talking about there being like sleepy little movies, but I do think that in terms of sort of digestion and contemplation, those to me are a little bit slower. I don't know.
No, I don't disagree with you. I was more so just poking fun.
Oh, good one, Mike. I'm glad we now have me on record defending something.
This may be my new thing that I just come at you, Sam, with these from time to time. So, Rachel, is there, out of those films, you talked about some of the humor, and I think one of the interesting things that a lot of people will say about the new series is, oh, wow, it's got way too many jokes. Star Wars has never been about jokes, and yet you can watch the original, and a lot of us can, and see all the humor. Yeah. Is there, not only just from the humor side of things, but, like, is there a scene from all of the films that is one of your favorites? Or give us a couple of your favorite scenes.
Well, in the original, I love when we first meet old Obi-Wan, and I find that scene very funny because he's like a very surprising character, and he's very feisty, like unexpectedly feisty and wise, and like really just enjoying himself and his current life. So I like that moment a lot. Similarly,
in The Force Awakens, I really like Maz Kanata. When we first meet her, I find her to be very similar, like very feisty, very wise, very much just kind of reveling in her moment. Is it weird that they're both old characters that I really enjoy, and like I'm not enjoying the people as much
towards.
Yeah, I'm very much like a 70-year-old woman trapped in a 28-year-old woman's body.
I think Maz is a great character to like. She's funny. I think I'd like to see more of Maz, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, bring her back.
I think like the reminder that also that like I regularly forget that that's Lupita Nyong'o, like doing that voice.
I don't even think I knew that.
Rachel's making a face of just utter mind blowness.
What the hell?
Yeah.
I like that.
So the age
so
and
wild.
wisdom that she's channeling as you know, I mean, speaks to her incredible talent. I mean, look at anything she does, she brings it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
She's got the range.
Mm-hmm. I will say, so on the flip side of that, in terms of moments I really dislike, I feel so bad that Ryan is not here right now. Because honestly, so thinking through like my experience with the prequels and my experience with the original trilogy and the current one, I think I really strongly dislike the prequels. And it's not actually because I think that they are bad movies. Like, I don't know enough about film to know if they are bad movies. But the trajectory of Queen Amidala or Senator Amidala, whatever Natalie Portman's character's name is so deeply troubling to me as a woman. Like, it is the relationship that she enters into at, like, I don't know, I guess it's the beginning of the second movie, but really she enters into it in the first movie. The trajectory is that it's such an abusive relationship. Like, you're watching her slowly get pulled into this emotional relationship that she will never be able to get out of. And it's not earned. Like, I never feel watching those movies like, oh, I understand why they're in love with each other. It just feels like two people that like just decide that they are in love, and then she gets stuck and he gets violent. And it's like really disturbing to watch that. The whole third movie is so upsetting that she is stuck, and she was such a strong character in the first two movies. She was such a strong leader, and you see her fight, and you see her leadership as a senator and as a queen, and like she's cunning, and then she gets trapped in this relationship in the third movie, and it ruins her. So I really dislike those movies.
I think that's
just because of that.
But that's
one storyline.
It's a really interesting point that I don't think we talk about enough, and I am sad Ryan is not here as well, because I would want to hear his perspective on this. But you mentioned it. I mean, she is a senator. She's a queen. She's leading the, basically calling for the vote of no confidence. She's out there as a leader, and then she's relegated to doing very little, to being next to Anakin and just reacting to Anakin rather than having any agency over anything she's doing. The way they wrote that character in the third was just such a disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that is it the first time we see her in the third movie when she tells him that she's pregnant?
Yeah.
So the fact that the third movie, like, her storyline is, oh, she got pregnant, and now, like, that's just what she does.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's exact first time, but I mean, it is pretty much predominantly what her storyline is in the third movie. Does she have a moment where she's fighting in the first two? She's a warrior, even though, I mean, that's not her classification. She's obviously a senator and a queen, but she's out there with a blaster, and then in the pit in Attack of the Clones, she's fighting off monsters and creatures and aliens. And then in the third movie, she's just there saying that you're breaking my heart and falling into almost like a trope.
Well, I wonder if there's an element of that is like, again, the prequel trilogy is in some ways an inverse of the original trilogy, right? The whole idea of like these things mirror one another, it's cyclical, everything repeats. And like this idea that like we saw, I mean, Leia from the beginning was introduced to us as a princess who by the end of the first movie we're seeing, fire a blaster and take on a leadership role as this like code smuggler, leading the rebellion. And then in her two follow-up movies, I think her I guess there's that bikini thing, but I was like,
Yeah,
I was
that's
like
also
largely
very problematic.
But I was like, largely, I think they do give Carrie Fisher more to do as her tenure in Star Wars went, you know, and they give her more sort of credence as a Star Warrior, as opposed to just like a woman or princess or you know, queen or whatever, which is interesting. I think this is a really important thing that we don't.
It's a very great perspective, and I think that it could also, I mean, whether it's bad filmmaking or intentional or not, I mean, it does illustrate that Darth Vader is a bad dude. Then I think kind of heightens that point a little bit more. If you thought he was the cute kid, like it makes him a little less of a tragic story too, right? Like he's just bombarding or just like taking away any chance that this woman had, right?
Well,
just by, like,
and as an audience, it takes away all of the empathy you could possibly have for him.
Yeah.
So,
Rachel,
we
I
get
have
a little bit of that empathy back.
Well, go ahead, Sam.
We get a little of that empathy back when he kills them younglings, though, right?
Well, that was going to be my point. I mean, I have a very important question for you, Rachel. And I think this is not about the younglings, because before we ever get to the fact that Padme is pregnant, and then they're having this relationship, they have a moment in Attack of the Clones where if Sam ever said to you, I killed them all, the women and children too,
I would not hug him.
Yeah, would your relationship
not
continue
hug
at
him.
that point?
The fact that that is like the moment when you clearly see them bond is so disturbing. He has just told her he's been as violent as he could possibly be.
As anyone
and
could
that
be.
he is like emotionally disturbed at how easy it was for him. And she's like, oh, come here, I'll hug you and it'll be fine. I'm like, no, that's the moment where you run away.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well,
If you've ever like thrown things at a TV screen while watching a movie, that would be the moment.
Why would you ever do that? No, movies are good places.
Sam, you're not going to be putting Attack of the Clones back on anytime in your house.
Yeah.
It's an after Rachel's bedtime movie for sure.
I mean, we were supposed to ask you if you had any hot takes, but I feel like you got it right there. I do wonder, you know, other than the Slave Leia bikini, what else would you say, Rachel, you feel like has aged really poorly about the original films? Is there anything that stands out there like, wow, this just feels out of place now? Because I think for all of us, we are so ingrained with the movies that it's hard for us to even recognize some of the faults in them.
It's great to get an objective viewpoint. Like what you just said was like such a refreshing perspective.
Oh, thank you.
Like I hadn't heard, basically for the last, as long as we've been doing the podcast, I'm pretty sure we haven't strayed from our opinions, so that's pretty good. It's enlightening.
I mean, the hairstyles have not aged well. What is that like weird bowl haircut that Luke is rocking in the first movie? It's just
Hey, they didn't have a lot of.
Go to a salon and get some pomade up in there.
I say there's not a lot of salons or barbers on Tatooine.
Yeah, in the desert.
Do you think the Tossie station has a barber in there while you wait for your things to get fixed?
Most likely.
I think Aunt Beru does it for him still.
Cuts his hair. Yeah, I could see that.
That's great. That's great.
He's a farm boy.
Very true.
On the other hand, though, do you have issue with anything? And I would imagine the answer is probably not. You don't have any issue with Harrison Ford and Han Solo's hair throughout any moment.
Oh no, he's dashing and dapper, and he's got those jackets.
Ooh, Sam.
Yeah, and now you're all witnessing the foundations of our very partnership.
I think about a month ago, I texted Sam a picture, or maybe it was longer. I texted Sam a picture of Harrison Ford in like a chambray button down. I think it was from like the Indiana Jones era. And I was like this. And he was like, interesting. Good to note. It was a very, very sexy photo of Harrison.
It was. I can concur. It was a very sexy photo of Harrison.
I was trying to figure out how we segue to our part 2 of the Marvel conversation, and sexy Harrison Ford photos doesn't lend itself to a good segue. Anybody got anything?
Oh,
here?
I've got one. I've got one.
Go for it, Rachel.
I wrote this out in my notes. If you think about the fact that Natalie Portman is like stuck in a somewhat abusive relationship in the original trilogy of Star Wars, or not the original. I'm so sorry. The prequels of Star Wars. I'm so sorry to everybody. Yeah. I misspoke. It kind of leads into the character that she plays in Thor 2, where she is this woman who like is desperately in need of being saved, and they basically just use her. They're like using her body, and Thor is trying to save this damsel in distress, and then we forget about her at the end of the movie.
Then she just goes
We never
away.
see her again. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's my segue.
She's a vessel for the ether.
Yes.
Who's then promptly she's just vesseled right out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe apparently.
I think the Natalie Portman also now. Rachel, we have these characters called binding geeks. I never thought that Natalie Portman, she is a binding geek.
She's a binding geek. She is indeed. Are there any others between Star Wars and the Marvel Universe?
That's a great question.
Well, there's about to be, because I think the rumors is Mark Hamill will be joining Guardians of the Galaxy #3, I believe.
Wow.
So that's a pretty big binding.
There you
geek.
go.
That's
I mean,
that's
Benicio del Toro.
Benicio.
Benicio
there
del
you
Toro
go.
is a
there you
binding
go.
geek.
Oh, great catch.
And in this phase, oh, snap.
Ooh, yeah, he's introduced.
That's
going to
be my catchphrase.
I can think of actors I'd like in both of them. I feel like wasn't Benedict Cumberbatch in one of the stormtrooper uniforms? I bet he was.
Whatever. You know what? Whether he was or not,
Unsubstantiated.
you've heard it here first.
Well, let's get into it. Let's get into Phase 2. We talked about Phase 1 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we're doing this as a bit of a conversation not only leading up to Avengers Endgame, but for those of you who are Star Wars fans, obviously listening to a Star Wars podcast. It's relevant not only because of the binding geeks, but because of the way that we're seeing the cinematic universes grow and the way Marvel built their cinematic universe with Star Wars trying to do something similar, a little bit different, but they still want to have that regular cadence of films. So we're into Phase 2. We talked all about Phase 1 in last week's episode. Go back and listen to that. I think, Sam, anything you want to do to introduce us here before we get further into our conversation?
I'm still just back on when Rachel said that she had notes. I think that's a first for the pod.
You don't have notes every episode, Sam? I'm very disappointed to hear this.
No, I'm trying in terms of leading in.
Clearly no notes. Clearly no notes.
No, I'm not sure if there was. We're just I think you said it nicely. Gearing up for Endgame, and where we left off with Phase 1, we sort of just for those who maybe didn't catch, we did a super fast speed through recap of the Avengers. And I guess we'll just, maybe to start off, I'll just run through the movies that we're going to be talking about that are part of Phase 2. So it's following the first Avengers movie from 2012. We go Iron Man 3, Thor 2, The Dark World, Captain America, Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, that's Volume 1, then Avengers Age of Ultron, and just sneaking in, because he's so tiny nobody noticed, Ant-Man is the final movie. The first Ant-Man ends Phase 2. So who wants to take it away? Maybe we start with some Iron Man 3 discussion. Rachel and I actually just watched it this week.
Sunday night. Yeah. So here's my question. It came out in May, and yet it's a Christmas movie?
That's very interesting.
Like, what the hell?
Ooh, mixing the seasons. That
But
always
also
makes
just,
me
why
feel-
is it a Christmas movie?
It always makes me feel uncomfortable when that happens.
Why did it even need to take place near a holiday?
Now, I do think I feel obligated to say that this is, one of my favorite things about this movie. So this is actually a movie I rate very highly in the Marvel Universe. It's frequently listed. Well, it's either most people rank it high or very low. People, there's some things people don't like about this movie, but what I love about it is a Shane Black movie through and through. He has a co-writing credit and a directing. Obviously, he was the director. But like Shane Black has he's got a thing for Christmas movies. Like Lethal Weapon's a Christmas movie. Is Kiss Kiss Bang Bang a Christmas time?
It might be. I think. Yeah. I mean, it probably. Back.
He's a Christmas dude.
Yeah. And I also think that it is a funny choice, and it does add a weight to it. It's got a built-in timer in your movie when you do that, because you're always like in your mind when you towards the holidays, right? Everyone's like gearing up towards the end of the year, so I think like it adds a little anxiety that just may not have been there before. And is it the only Marvel holiday movie? Is there another one?
I think it's the only Marvel holiday movie.
Yeah.
Are you forgetting about Hulk's Halloween special?
Oh, I am forgetting about Hulk's Halloween special.
I feel like we should forget about that.
Oh, I would so love
Yeah.
that. Please, just give me more Hulk.
But no, I think the standout for Iron Man 3 for me is really the twist of the Mandarin. I mean, you have Ben Kingsley in your movie. Like, it's pretty insane.
He's very funny.
Yeah, and he's like
very,
legit
very funny.
funny. I think he was not to be ageist, but I think he was 71 or 72 years old when he filmed that.
Why was
Doesn't
that being
look a day
ageist,
over
Chris?
68.
Huh?
Why
Well,
were
I'm
you
just
being
saying-
ageist? That sounded. I mean, you didn't say anything negative.
Well, I was just gonna say for like him to be like that involved and on top of things like at that age.
We should
As,
all
like-
be so lucky.
Right, exactly. Like I think that it's pretty phenomenal, the performance he pulled out and just like recognizing what was going on. And I think that's really a tribute to probably to the writers as well. Like that it could have been a standalone story, right? Like that story didn't aside from all the Iron Men towards the end, it didn't necessarily have to be an Iron Man story. Like I could have seen that as an action movie from the era of Shane Black.
I think it definitely, yeah, it does very well as an Iron Man movie, but I do think I hear what you're saying, Chris. It's a movie that could live outside of that and still be a successful movie. Rachel, watching it with you. So I think the turn, Chris, I agree. I think it's a brilliant turn, and I love that. It's one of my favorite parts. And I think part of what makes it so successful is that, like, Ben Kingsley is also, like, chilling when we, going into it, think he is the true Mandarin, you know? And, like, his scenes, the way they shoot and cut those scenes, I mean, this was 2012 or 2013, I think, when this came out. 2013, I think. You know, it's still like it's still calling on imagery that was very recent with the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and with Muammar Gaddafi and the protests in Egypt and everything. Like there's just a lot of like very striking imagery, and I know that like Rachel, you like viscerally reacted to some of the early scenes of those the sort of terroristic videos of the Mandarin.
Yeah, I think it was just a little too tangible, a little too associated with real life. Whereas I feel like a lot of these movies, the threat is extraterrestrial or it's mythological, or it's science based. And this one was very much rooted in like what we are seeing on the news, or what we were seeing on the news around that time, and that was just very like, oh God, oof.
Yeah, and I think that
home.
like, even though this is the start of Phase 2, I think it kind of wraps up. I think thematically, a lot of it's almost like I always think of it's like the epilogue. Is it the right word? The afterword, the epilogue to Phase 1, because it kind of wraps up a lot of the tonal stuff that we saw through that first phase. Like I think there's just like I think they were really going for like an ultra, not an ultra like adult type take, but I think they were trying to play a little more adult to adult audiences than we currently see now.
Well, and it's a bold move to like it's also one of the reasons that Tony Stark and like Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark is, I think, as compelling and enduring a character as he is in this franchise. I mean, we see him go through PTSD and an actual like have anxiety attacks and fear, and it's like something that you've just it really was like a bold move to take your most popular at that time character in the franchise and go to that sort of serious and dark of a place. I mean, he's dealing with like vets who are being used and turned into like essentially human explosives. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's a wild move, and I think that is definitely a bold move for the franchise. And also, I think around this time, wasn't Robert Downey Jr., there was a lot of talk of him, is he going to keep being Iron Man? Because he had done 4 of these movies where he was Iron Man, or 5 or whatever it was at the time. But then, like, I think there was a lot of talk that he may be stepping down. Like, I think there was still a potential for him to not be in those movies anymore.
I think they also said that was going to be the final Iron Man standalone film, and that has been true. We have not seen another Iron Man. Even though he's played such prominent roles in a lot of other movies now, they don't seem like they're going back to that well anytime soon with Tony Stark. And I think that's fine. I think they've done enough.
Oh, yeah.
I do want to go back to the Mandarin conversation for just a second. And I love everything that you're talking about because I think it was a great piece with the Tony Stark going through PTSD and the anxiety that he's dealing with and kind of breaking him down again was a really nice choice for them to do that in the third film. I love what they did with the Mandarin. I do love the turn. I just think that Guy Pearce is a little bit weak as a villain after that. I like the story of being the spurned guy who was just trying to get his time to be able to create something brilliant together. That story's fine. I just find myself feeling like I'm not very invested once he's the main villain. I may be alone in that.
I'll jump in. No, I'll jump in, and I think the issue I'm having is like I don't disagree with you. I do think he is a little less sort of compelling and charismatic than Ben Kingsley. It doesn't. I think it doesn't really hurt the film for me. Like I realize I may be saying something that like it's hard for me to imagine, you know, a really incredible, awesome, you know, villain in that part.
Yeah, it was.
But like I didn't miss it. I didn't need it.
Yeah, it was almost a movie where, and I think this is true for all the Iron Man movies. It's like a lot of people are fighting their own demons. Mm-hmm. And I think that sometimes that makes the characters come across a little more subtle than they actually are, and then the fact also that they're probably improvising every scene for those first few Iron Man movies. So I think that like I hear what you're saying though. Yeah, like it didn't have the oomph. Like you were kind of like, oh, okay, well it was just that guy that we already saw.
Well, I mean, the way we all described.
But I think at that point, like you're running on adrenaline to the end of the movie. Right? You weren't going to take a step back and be like, well, I'm not really committed to watching the end of the movie because this villain doesn't seem as bad anymore.
Right.
You're riding out the story and you're riding out the adrenaline and you're riding out Tony's story.
Yeah.
Oh,
so I think
you definitely are. And,
like,
I don't think, even like the way you're saying it, Sam, it doesn't turn the movie into a bad movie for me. It just ends up being a little bit of deflating feeling afterwards, and I think it's because of the way you describe the Mandarin and how exciting it is and how much you kind of build it up in your imagination because you're not seeing all of who he is, and then when it is revealed, it's hilarious and it's a wonderful moment. It just feels like nothing else can then compare because you've been building up this thing in your mind. By the way, okay, we do need to move on to our next film because we are already running short on time. Thor: The Dark World, Thor 2, this one, much maligned by a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe fans. I don't love it, but I don't have as big a problem with it as maybe others do.
I almost have no opinion on it. I mean,
same, Chris. I'm just like, oh, yeah, that one happened.
Oh, good, we can move on.
And it's one of those movies that, here's my issue with the Thor movie, and we could definitely move on. And just real quick, it's like, they just keep going back and forth to like 2 different locations. And it's like, I just feel like it's such an inefficient story. Like, we're just going back and forth to 2 places, and nothing's really happening on either place until the end.
They really do rely on Thor's ability to teleport in that movie.
It's like they wrote 2 separate stories, and they're like, oh, then he can, like, teleport back and talk to them, and then he'll teleport back and talk to them. Like, the whole movie is based on the premise that he figured out how to teleport again.
Yes.
So if that's what they wanted to tell us.
I remember Sam and I watched that movie in our apartment, I don't know, inside the last year or 2. And I remember kind of mentally checking out about halfway through and just being like, I guess I'm just going to watch this because I can't make any sense out of what they're doing. And I don't think it matters.
Yeah.
Well, can I jump in and I'll say if I'm going to I'll be the lone one with the positives because I think you guys have hit on the like either negatives or like non-plussed factors enough. I'll say I think a couple things that are really great are I do really like Rene Russo's Frigga and
great.
What they give. Like, it's a small scene and they do absolutely fridge her, which is lame, but I think she gets like kind of a dope scene in the movie, and I think she and Natalie Portman, it's like the one scene they both like get something cool to do.
Yeah.
So I like that. And then I do think, and it's been a minute, but I think I like this one visually better than the first Thor. Just from the shooting style, the framing, I like the colors, and I think they kind of, at this point, is when I think they figured out how to like style Hemsworth as Thor. I think in those first two, he looks a little odd. He's got those blonde eyebrows and
And the wig.
I do also like the two assistants, the intern and Kat Dennings' character. I think. I think that
Very
was
funny.
great. They used them very well, and it was very comic booky call out bubbles. Like what's she call the hammer? Like yum yum or something.
Meow meow.
Yum yum. Yeah. I think it's great.
I will always enjoy Loki. I'll always enjoy Tom Hiddleston. I'm excited. There's a Marvel streaming series that's going to be led by Tom Hiddleston as Loki.
Disney Plus.
Heck yes.
More Loki.
I will say that his death and lack of death again in this movie is when I started to be like, we're going to run into a problem here if everybody who dies doesn't die, in my opinion. I know that's not the entire opinion of the pod, but I was like, this has some emotion to it. I'm feeling something because I think he's actually dying. No, he didn't.
If only that were true of Infinity War.
No, you bite your tongue. No one dies.
I don't think it's going to be true.
Rachel's coming back for the third phase.
Avenges never say die.
All right, we're on our way to Captain America: Winter Soldier, and I will say I'll start this thing off. This is my favorite Marvel film. It continues to be
of all time,
of all of them. I will say I do think Black Panther is a better movie. I'm going to tip my cat to Black Panther in that respect. But I think there's very few, if any, faults I can find within Winter Soldier. I love the way that they delve into the gray of who Cap has to be now and the decisions he has to make with his friend and the way that relationship and his new adjustment. Really, we haven't seen him adjust to the real world since being unfrozen, because immediately he was thrown into what was going on in Avengers and the attack on New York. So this is actually us seeing how he's back in the world and his relationship with Falcon and the way that he goes through, talking about his difficulty in readjusting and even really mirroring what veterans are going through, at least in the most basic way that they tried to do it. But I felt like there's enough earnestness in both Anthony Mackie and Chris Evans' performance that I feel like even though it was a slight touch, they did such a great job of exploring that. And then the action in this is better than any other fighting that I feel like we've seen from Captain America and anything else in the series. I love that first moment on the boat. The way he's showing his power feels different than anything else we've seen from him. There's almost like I don't know what the best way to describe it. There's like this bull rush of everything that he's doing. Yeah. And I was so impressed with that. And then the choreography, his fight with what's the French?
Batroc the Leaper.
Yeah. That was. I felt like there was some cool stuff in there, but it did feel like they were kind of both dancing at each other.
There's a few of them. This movie has a lot of very action-packed violent sequences.
The elevator scene.
Yeah.
But
I really enjoyed that. And then it's great to see Cap and Natasha fighting too. That's pretty good.
And there's also a nice moment where they stop at the Apple Store, and it's a fun little plug in there.
That's right.
But the moments with Peggy,
product placement.
There's always a lot. I think that's a problem that Joss Whedon ran into in Age of Ultron, which we'll maybe talk a little bit about. But I think that with Hydra coming in, Robert Redford and his performance, the conversation, and even talking about the moment where he says this isn't freedom, this is fear. I think that there's some people who would say they didn't go enough into that kind of political conversation that they could have, but I loved it. I thought that they did well enough to that, and to see how they could use data to target people. I just thought that was all so forward thinking. It was really wonderful.
It's very funny you brought that up, Mike. I just read a comic this morning where Dan's soapbox was about a lot of people say this was during the 70s, and people would write in and say, why don't you choose your aside more? Why aren't Marvel comics more political? And Stan Lee's response was basically don't you read what these characters do? Do we need to tell you outright what side we're on?
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty funny. So maybe the movies are taking a note from Stan.
Sorry, Rachel, did you I'll just jump in and with this one, I think it's echoing everything Mike said. I love this. This one's right up there at the top. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's right up there. But also, like, just shout out to the entire supporting cast. I think something they did was, like, whereas the Iron Man movies were this force of pure Downey straight to the vein, and, like, those movies fly on his charisma alone. And I know he's got a supporting cast as well, and I'm not dissing them or trying to, but, like, those movies are him. And I think they really, really smartly, with the second Cap movie, brought in, you know, Nick Fury, Natasha. They introduced the incredible Anthony Mackie. Then you throw Robert Redford in there for good measure. You know, you bring in all these amazing actors.
It felt to me like one of those great Clancy movie, like a Harrison Ford Clancy movie at times. Like, there's so many different like tropes and styles of movies in this movie, but they're all kind of like those political action thrillers. Like, where it's
totally,
Home Base has turned on me now. I need, like, Bourne Identity kind of thing too, going on there.
There was definitely a Bourne thing going on,
and even at the I think the final scene of the movie when he's in the hospital bed and he's like, on your left, like, and then that music. It's like one of the
many good lines.
It's like one of the coolest endings to a movie though, and it just like starts playing that song, which I thought
the list, from Trouble Man. The list of things that Anthony Mackie gives him from like the last 60 years or whatever, and it's it's got that album on it. It's got it's so good.
It's such a great, but it's like that scene almost doesn't fit the rest of the movie. I was like, I want to see that movie.
I would absolutely watch that.
Yeah.
But there are so many good lines in this, and we have to move on because there's not nearly enough time to talk about this. Also, we have to say the elevator scene is amazing. Anything. Go ahead, Rachel.
The Hydra storyline is incredibly interesting. I did a deep dive in the fandom Wikipedia pages yesterday, and it is just like there's such depth to the backstory of all of that. It was really, really fascinating. So I recommend to anyone that's interested in it, do the deep dive. You'll learn a lot. I loved like the budding bromance between Falcon and Cap. I thought that was like a very sweet component of the movie, and it made me really excited to see this new character brought into the fold and to see like where their relationship went as Cap was trying to wrestle with the news about Bucky. So that's all I wanted to say about this movie.
It's so difficult for Falcon when he has to now be on the sidelines when Cap and Bucky are best friends again, unrequited best buds.
Classic story of unrequited best buds. What's up next?
Unbroquited love.
Oh, there it is.
Chris, you want to set us up for Guardians of the Galaxy?
Ooh, Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, when I saw this movie, I literally thought this was what year was this?
2014.
So this was a year before Star Wars came out. The part of me thought like, oh, Marvel gets it. Like, I thought literally like, I don't know if we need Star Wars. You know what I mean? Like, I had
Whoa, Chris.
Chris did say that, and I'll tell you what, I was right there with you, my man.
Yeah,
I agreed.
I've had this, and I think it's just because there's a void. When you don't have Star Wars movies, there's a definite void, and you're looking for something to fill that up. And I think the Star Trek reboots came very close, and I think that this movie then, once those kind of died down, this movie was like the next filler. And I mean, it's legitimately hilarious, not just for a Marvel movie, but for a movie. I think it's the most imaginative Marvel movie, in my opinion. Like, what you're seeing on screen is insane. It's got those like pure joyful sci-fi elements of just like, this is weird because we can make it weird, and that kind of uncomfortable old school Hitchhiker's Guide type, like just everything is large and inefficient, and it's the weird future, it's the dirty future. This is top 3 favorite Marvel movies for me.
Yeah, I think I was, Chris, I saw this with you, and I think in addition to the Star Wars comments, I think the thing I said was that I was like, if the question was like, why do we even need more Star Wars right now with this? I think there was also a question of like, am I still supposed to care about the Avengers?
Right. Yeah.
I was so, and I think when we get to it, because it'll be coming up very soon, when we talk Ultron, I think Guardians is actually one of the big reasons that I had a hang up on Ultron at first, because I was just like, Guardians was so much cooler and better and more fun at the time.
It just felt like a fresh take where we had kind of muddled in these characters for a while.
Guardians all of a sudden felt more modern than Ultron did. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that is like the color and the play that's happening. It's very cool.
For me, the Guardians movies are this like smack in the middle, perfect mix, perfect marriage of what I love from like Star Trek TOS, the original series, and Star Wars. They are simultaneously this like hero's journey, epic adventure thing that's kind of rooted in family, mixed with like the sort of quirky, swashbuckling pirate / Western show that was the Star Trek show.
Yep. And all those weird 80s sci-fi movies like Flight of the Navigator and like those kind of things also kind of mixed in there. Just I think Disney, somebody told them tap into nostalgia. Like they got it.
I think it's interesting that like smack in the middle of a franchise that's built based on a team coming together, that you have this completely separate team that you get to see, and so you get to compare the dynamics between like the Avengers and the Guardians, and that was very fun.
Yeah, these are like the beta Avengers, and it's fun in the best way.
They also got the heart right in all of this. And in both movies so far, there's several moments that I felt more emotion than maybe a lot of the other Marvel films.
Sure.
You know, Groot at the end, the beginning, his mom throughout, and then even with, I'm forgetting the character in the second one where he's Mary Poppins. Just the father figure there where you think it's a father story about his actual
Yondu.
father, but it's not. It's about Yondu. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think they just did a fabulous job with that.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Mike.
And James Gunn's coming back, baby. I think James Gunn's a big part of the success of that, so I'm excited that he'll be back for the third one.
All right, that brings us to Ultron. Sam, it sounds like you're chomping at the bit here to get a little bit more into Ultron. I will say I did enjoy it immensely the first time. I held it up there as I didn't think it was better than the original Avengers, but I did love it when I saw it. I was not hung up, had the hangover from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Well, I got to say, this is another one that Chris and I have seen basically every one of these since the first Thor together, or maybe since the first Iron Man back in college.
I believe we saw Iron Man together.
Midnight showing, State College.
Yeah.
But I think we saw this, and definitely the mood was like decidedly just like disappointed. We were like, what was that?
Somebody made a duck sound after we saw it. Went,
and so I decidedly was like, this is the lesser Avengers. This is Joss Whedon going like too Joss with it, or something was lost.
There's a scene where they're putting on flannel shirts.
And I have to say, this movie freaking rocks. And I today would say that I think this is a better Avengers movie than the first Avengers. And that I will go on record with.
Wow. I would say I might get there if they didn't treat Black Widow so horribly in this movie. Mm-hmm. Basically saying she's a monster because she can't have kids. That was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I didn't. I have seen that leveled against this movie elsewhere online, and I don't. That's not how I read the monster line. I read it as she is from her childhood, excuse me. She has been raised and conditioned and psychologically and physically trained into becoming truly a monster, a killing machine. She was physically experimented on to make her sterile. So it's like the idea of like a being that was sort of made in a lab with the express purpose of like killing. And so that's how I read that. I think people latched on to the one element of that, which was this whole sterility factor that the KGB supposedly used as a way of keeping their agents from, turning double or putting down roots anywhere, and becoming family people. But it's like, I think it's like, I did not tie a direct line between the monstrous line and the family thing.
I'd have to. Sure. I mean, I need to watch it again because I felt like it was a pretty direct moment where she says this and that makes her a monster. As I thought that's what she said. Maybe I need to see the scene again.
No, I think throughout the movie they're kind of going. I mean, the way I'm kind of with Sam on this. I didn't take it as that direct equation. I think. I mean, maybe the character felt that way. I don't know, but I think they kind of teased out her childhood and how she was killing people throughout the whole movie, and I think maybe was that the best place to put that line after she gave that speech? Probably not, because of this confusion. But I don't think they're making that direct equation.
Did we mishear her? Did she say momster?
This could be. So I think
Rachel's just shaking her head. She's silently glaring at me and shaking her head. She's like, "Not a funny joke.
No.
Get off the pod." Okay, yes. I leave now.
But yeah, so I don't know. Maybe give it a rewatch. But yeah, either way, I mean, maybe it didn't have to be. Maybe that stake didn't have to be in there. As it after all, it's like it's a pretty dark thing to add, and maybe that was just Whedon going like a little too much license.
Yeah, I will say, I don't remember enjoying this movie a whole lot, and it's definitely not in my favorites. I think there are two good things that come out of this movie, which is we get Vision, who's wonderful. Paul Bettany is doing a beautiful job in that role, hopefully continuing to do so. We'll see. And we get to see Hawkeye's house and family, and the fact that he is like a real person with a life and isn't, I don't know, the rest of our characters are so siloed in their social lives, and it's just so nice to see that like he's a well-rounded, fully tapped into his emotions human being.
It definitely reminded me of those moments in like Buffy before like something apocalyptic would have. There'd be like episodes in Buffy where they'd just be hanging out in the house at night and just like playing games.
Yeah,
like,
real people.
There's a few scenes like the party scene also kind of illustrates that with the hammer bit of like who can pick up the hammer is hilarious.
Yeah,
if you put it in an elevator, is the elevator worthy?
Oh gosh.
But Rachel,
that was a funny scene. I'll give you that.
You bring up a really good point because I actually think that Joss Whedon had to fight so hard to get that in there. And it really gives this more, again, heart to the film because you're watching Hawkeye and Sokovia making a decision to go out and fight when he has all of this on the line and a lot of other characters. While they do have investment, it's not quite the same when you see a home life in this way. And it's interesting that I think that Marvel was kind of against that because they felt like it was a downbeat in the movie, but really it benefited the movie in a big way. And I think there's this challenge of fighting the propulsive action always, which is good in a lot of movies, but sometimes you do need to give a little bit more of these character moments. And I find it interesting that Joss Whedon was then like, okay, I'm done. I'm not doing Marvel anymore. They tried to overstep and tell me everything I had to do, but yet he still got that scene in there. As long as he made sure to show Gillette while the Hulk was shaving, that was how he got the home life scene in.
Still, yeah, it's the best part of the movie, I think.
The Gillette scene?
Yeah.
Specifically the Gillette call out, or that he does the splash page move again.
And it's
when they're
great.
all back to back in that like sort of tower in Sokovia. That's a dope big camera move.
Oh, and then also Wakanda's being set up in this movie.
True.
Oh, right,
True.
right.
Yeah, there's obviously this is kind of where Marvel was not able to pull the full amount of their weight though, is they could not get they had to make Quicksilver or what's his name?
Yeah. Quicksilver.
And Scarlet Witch, they weren't allowed to be called those names.
Right, and they weren't technically mutants. They were called miracles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of just a little nerdy detail, but kind of interesting though that they just went ahead and did it. Like, it's pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
How did we all feel about Quicksilver's death?
Great. Didn't see it coming, which is the whole joke, because they're setting you up, and it was like I was so ready to be done with that freaking movie if they killed Hawkeye, because I was like I was literally getting mad that I was like, is he seriously this clumsy of a filmmaker that he has to signpost this the whole way through? Which is then like the egg was on my face, because it was like that was what Whedon was doing. He was manipulating audiences to expect one character to die, and then did the unexpected. I think it's a well played moment between both actors. Also, I actually think Aaron Taylor Johnson is like, he doesn't have a lot to do in the movie, but I think he really hits the mark on that scene.
Yeah.
My guess is that they were waiting while they're filming the movie to see if they could get the rights, and then they realized they couldn't.
Ouch.
And they're like, sorry,
We're done.
Can't do this one again. No, I'm just kidding, because obviously Scarlet Witch was in the next Avengers.
I honestly, I didn't feel like I got to know him well enough for his death to hurt me.
That's fair.
He was like, we had only just met him, and I wasn't that invested in his storyline that his death didn't carry a ton of weight.
Mm-hmm.
I think
forward.
Hawkeye to me gave it that weight because he was talking to Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver of like having meaning in their lives and contributing in a certain way, and that performance by Jeremy Renner made it more meaningful because of what it meant to Hawkeye's character that he had been saved, that mattered, even though Quicksilver, I didn't know him well enough.
Well, and Hawkeye wanted to shoot him like a minute before.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Guys, Jeremy Renner is so good. He's so good as Hawkeye.
Not good enough to be in Infinity War though.
Okay,
He's so good.
Okay, we got to move on from this. We got to move on from this Renner conversation.
We got to move in. I do want to
Interesting.
say though,
Interesting,
it is
yeah.
interesting to see him in the trailers for Endgame because it kind of looks like, and Rachel and Sammy talked about this, about the family and how important it is. It kind of looks like his family was snapped out of existence. I can't understand any other reason than why he's the way he is in the trailer, other than the fact that his family's been snapped away.
I completely agree with you. I think that's what has happened to him. Yes. And then he's come out the other side with a really cool haircut.
That's what you do when you lose your family.
That's right.
Or just a haircut.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of a haircut that's always on point, Mr. Paul Rudd is the star.
Oh,
of
hasn't
Ant-Man.
aged a day.
I feel
What is
bad
he
that
doing?
Ryan, has not aged a single day. I feel like he is a superhero himself. I'm sad that Ryan is not here. Ryan notoriously has run into Mr. Paul Rudd several times throughout New York City. And I think,
but he's never
the
talked
same.
to him, right? He's always kind of seen him across the way. I'd
know,
have to
but-
say
but-
I
but
stepped
I was
up and
gonna
said
say
hello
you-
myself.
I was
like
going
you
to
gotta
say
wait.
you also have a tail, though.
Well, I mean, fortunately, this happened recently, and I got to ask Paul Rudd if he could tell me any Avengers spoilers, and he told me never heard of that movie. So, pretty classic Paul Rudd. It was a nice moment.
He's
What
great.
a delightful story.
We should get him on the pod.
I should have
Mr.
asked.
Rudd.
I don't know
Can we
why.
just
I
Get
didn't.
him as a
Rudd.
friend.
You can be a friend. You can be a fan.
So as we
You
start
can't be both.
the conversation about Ant-Man, I will say I don't think enough people talk about the foundation of what Edgar Wright did to make this movie great.
Mm-hmm.
Peyton Reed came in to direct it after Edgar Wright left because of creative differences with Marvel, but he still has his fingerprints all over this script. And even the Michael Pena moment where he's doing the whole breakdown of everything and everybody's doing his voice as he tells the backstory, that is such a Wright kind of storyline. And I think that we don't give enough credit to Edgar Wright for it. And I'm also sad that we never got to see Edgar Wright's movie. I would have loved to have seen that version.
Yeah,
of it.
the fully formed vision. I think what we gave up in Edgar Wright's vision, we gained in a little bit of improv, a little bit
fair.
of loose corners. I mean, I think they rehired. I think they got Adam McKay to start doing some rewrites on
Yep.
it. I think they basically got rid of Edgar Wright, who's very funny in his own right. And then they got. I'm very pleased with that. And then they got.
You can't even finish your sentence
I
because
know,
you're
I
so
can't.
tickled
It's
by your
so
own
strange.
dumb joke.
They got a bunch of cool comedians to finish it off, and I think that movie is delightful. Out of the weight that Ultron was, to have Ant-Man kind of just point out how silly this stuff is, and then it's just kind of like a sciencey, nerdy, like sci-fi type movie with a guy that can get really small, and visually, I mean, when they get so small, it's so much fun to watch.
It's like a magic trick.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I'll do just a quick 20 seconds on this one. I think Chris is absolutely right that it's like it is light, it's funny. I think we actually got a lot more of the Edgar Wright movie than like Mike. I think you were saying that. I think we got. I actually think we got close to what that movie was gonna be. I think he put a lot in, and that was already in place. But I also think that like after after Guardians, we look at the road we have is like Cap, where they undo Shield and like have this huge spy thriller. Then you have Guardians that's like goes galactic. Then you have Avengers, where it's like everybody teaming up. The fact that Ant-Man is both like figuratively and literally a small movie is so refreshing, and it worked. I love this movie. It's a high rewatch one for me.
I think that's a lot to do with Rudd. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I totally agree. Like, I think of all the movies that I would just put on to rewatch a movie, and like I've said this before, I'm not a big movie person in terms of that experience, but dude, you're fine. I would put on Ant-Man. I think Ant-Man and then Ant-Man and the Wasp are incredibly strong standalone movies out of all of them. I think they are probably the strongest standalone movies.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Wow.
That's my hot
I would
take.
agree with that. I would agree.
I'll take Winter Soldier above those, but I agree with you. They are very good standalone, and his relationship with his daughter.
I don't think Winter Soldier is a standalone movie, though. I think you need to have
Yeah.
Captain
Oh,
America
fair,
as reference.
Yeah,
And I think like Ant-Man is a great standalone movie. It doesn't like
Yeah.
you could see this having not experienced anything else in the Marvel universe.
Could you say that for maybe any other movie? Maybe I think Black Panther you can see without seeing anything else in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Guardians? Question mark.
The first Guardians movie, yeah.
So there's a handful.
It's rare. It's just
It's
a
very
handful.
rare. And I think Ant-Man is the best of them.
yeah, I agree with that completely. Yeah, and I think it's also like a good movie to like. If that's the great thing about all these Marvel movies is there's like literally so many facets of things that you can enjoy, and like I'm just happy there's one with Paul Rudd that I'm like, oh, I like this even more now.
Yeah. He's a good person to bring into the universe.
Yeah,
It's what Marvel does so well. I mean, they're rumored to have Black Widow. They're going to have Rachel Weisz in Black Widow in the new movie. I mean, they cast incredibly well.
wow.
That's exciting.
That's a good move.
Well, all right. We would love to continue to talk about this, but we're kind of reaching our time here on this pod. Rachel,
Wait, I have two last things. I
Go
have two
for
last
it.
things to talk about.
Go for
'Cause
it.
I may never get to come back on the pod and have more of this
I thought you
conversation.
were coming back next week.
Oh, really? Great. Cool. Clear my schedule. So two things that I noticed when doing my deep dive of research through the fandom Wikipedia pages. The first thing is that in each of these movies, the bad guy is vanquished, which I think is really important, that they're all like wrapped up very neatly in a bow at the end. And I think it's very interesting that like this particular phase, the middle phase, is where they decide to do that, because there's this larger story that's happening that is the arc from phase 1 to phase 3 that is like the story of Thanos, and that has led us to Infinity War and Endgame, that is basically happening in the shadows, because they're so like each of our protagonists is so focused on the villain that they have to vanquish in the next 200 minutes. So I found that really interesting as I read through them. I was like, wait a second, like it's only in little blips, and it's usually in these like end credit scenes that we're actually seeing the bigger picture. But inside each of their own stories, they're so oblivious. So I found that super interesting. And the second thing is, and I can't believe we're going to talk about this at like the 70-minute mark, but the relationship between phase 2 and episode 2, episode 4, episode 5, is that where he loses his hand?
Yep. Yeah,
Guys,
there's a very
How
funny,
has nobody talked about this yet?
Good.
The fact that in each of these movies, someone gets their hand cut off.
You need to write all of our segues. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're 100% right. Was that intentional, or was that just like a happy accident?
I think it's
on my
intentional.
part?
I believe I saw someone.
Happy
So Rachel told me she was really excited to have a Star Wars tie-in to Phase 2, and I sort of thought this is what she was gonna. I had an inkling this is what it was, because I think I heard Kevin Feige acknowledge it at one point, like after the end of Phase 2, sort of acknowledging that this was like a fun thing that he wanted to subtly tie in with like their sort of middle phase of like this nod to like the middle phase of the original trilogy, which is great.
It just makes things more interesting.
Yeah, I think so. I only learned about the fact that there are phases a few days ago when Sam asked me to come on the pod. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize they had like separated them. But thinking through this idea of like what the standalone movies are, like the truly standalone movies, I think it's really interesting that because, going back to my first point, that because each of these movies wraps up their story in a bow and then we move on, it's almost like this phase is a standalone phase.
Yeah. It definitely is.
Yeah.
It's kind of a self-contained little like nugget.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I always think of Civil War as I thought it was phase 2, but it's not. It's phase 3. So when you don't have that in phase 2, then yeah. Absolutely. It doesn't have this. It is on its own without the larger next steps involved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Tony blows up all his suits, and then he has a bunch of suits in Ultron. Cap, like, Shield is all Hydra, but then like they're kind of not dealing with that except for one line of dialogue in Ultron. Like it's definitely like a little bit more encapsulated than we are today.
And I mean, we see these as confident movies now, but I mean, at the time, it could have just been story groups trying to figure out really what to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think, speaking of figuring out what to do, I'd be amiss if I didn't plug Ryan's, along with Ryan's Droid Pod on Twitch TV. Ryan has started a new Let's Play series that can be found on YouTube and Twitter. It's called Coping Mechanics, and you can find that on twitter.com/Coping Mechanics, COPING mech MECH games.com. So that's copingmechgames.com, where Ryan plays through various video games and kind of explains a Let's Play series where we talk about video games and anxiety. And so you can kind of listen to some of Ryan's findings and ways of dealing with anxieties through video games, which I think is very, very cool. So be sure to check out Coping Mechanics. It's on YouTube, but you can follow him on Twitter at Coping Mech Games. So thank you for that, Ryan. And don't forget about the Twitch thing, twitch.tv/Ryan DroidsPod. Don't forget about us, droidspod@gmail.com. Twitter, DroidsPod. Instagram, DroidsPod. And Facebook.com/ just search for the droid you're looking for.
Chris, I did this so well at the beginning. I don't know
Yeah,
why
you
you're
did.
falling apart.
This is the first time I just started doing it first time.
Rachel, you gave us such a fantastic intro. Would you
You really
you
did.
like to take us out here with the outro?
Oh, God, what do I say at the end? I didn't write that part of the script.
Oh no!
Oh, do I have to do Chris's Annie? Is that what this
Hey,
is?
all right.
You just did it.
A little out of order, but we'll take it.
I think if you just say, thanks for listening to the Droid You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast, we'll catch you next week, you will be set. And then you can do the Annie and any other of the post-credits tags.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Rachel. Have a good night. Annie?
Annie? You nailed the timing. That was perfect.
I'm proud of you guys.
That was so good. Hey, you all want to go to Medieval Times?
No, I want to go to Galaxy's Edge, Chris. I've been trying to get you to say Galaxy's Edge for a
I
while.
know. 6:55. Avengers. AM.